Good evening, everyone. My name is Kim Dorman, and I serve as the Community Engagement Coordinator for the Princeton Public Library. It's my pleasure to introduce tonight's program, the Ramapough and the Ringwood Mines Superfund site, History, Culture, Education, and Environmental Justice. I want to start by thanking you all for joining us. I hope that you've had the opportunity to see the display that's on the ground floor. The display is part of this project, and I have it on good authority that it was the reviewers' unanimous top pick of the Stanley N. Katz Prize for Excellence in the Public Humanities. And I'm also pleased to say that we have Stanley Katz himself here, so thank you. It's really wonderful. I also want to thank our partners who made this event possible. Beyond our wonderful presenters, who I will introduce momentarily, I'd like to thank Nagisa Manabe, the Seed Farm, the Land, Language, and Art Global Initiative, the School of Public and International Affairs in New Jersey, the Watershed Institute, and the National Endowment for the Humanities. Special thanks to the Land, Language, and Art Global Initiative, who generously provided the treats for the reception that some of you have been enjoying. I would like to mention before we get started that this room is T-coil enabled, so if you have a T-coil enabled device, you can turn it on at this time. They only work if everyone uses a mic, so I'm going to ask that everyone who's speaking uses a mic, and that if you have questions, you wait for me to bring you the mic. Each of the people presenting this evening is a thoroughly accomplished and wonderful human who does so much more than I could possibly say in a short description. Professor Jack Tchen, Director, Clement A. Price Institute on Ethnicity, Culture, and the Modern Experience, and Professor, Federated Department of History, Rutgers, Newark, and NJIT faculty. I really love the first sentence of his bio, so I'm excited to share it with you. Tchen is a historian, curator, writer, and dumpster diver, devoted to anti-racist, anti-colonialist, democratic, participatory storytelling, scholarship, and opening up archives, museums, organizations, and classroom spaces to the stories and realities of those excluded and deemed unfit in master narratives. Dr. Anita Bakshi is an architect with a particular interest in the relationship between memory and the material world, conflict and divided cities, and commemorative structures and practices. Tessa Lewinsky-Desmond is a scholar and a farmer. She teaches classes on food, farming, and literature in the Efron Center for the Study of America at Princeton University, and co-directs the Seed Farm at Princeton and the Princeton Food Project. Starting us off this evening is Chief Vincent Mann. Chief Mann is the Turtle Clan chief of the Ramapough Lenape Nation, which encompasses Passaic County, New Jersey, Warwick, and surrounding areas in New York. Chief Mann received the Russ Berry Foundation's highest award for being an unsung hero for his efforts together with his community to fight back after the Forge toxic dumping. I have to say that he and his wife, Mikey, do so much that there's no way that we could, even talk about it adequately for their community. So Chief Mann, if you'll start us off, thank you.
Kiha Kolomosi, Ninja Shinzi Kikai Man, Nunjiai Lamawo Takwa, Wak Lamawo Wanjikil, Wak Lamawo Sipu. How is everybody? My name is Chief Mann. I'm the Turtle Clan chief of the Ramapough Lenape Nation. I come from the Ramapough Mountains and the Ramapough River. Anishi Kishalamokwe, Elamilia and Yonkwai Kishtweet, Wak Kukana Aki, Wak Tinda, Wak Mbi, Wak Ilongo Mati, Wak Nimbu Mas Wakanum. Anishik, 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 Anishik. Thank you, Creator, for giving us this day. We thank you for our Mother Earth. We thank you for the fire and the water. We thank you for all of our relations. And most importantly, we thank you for our lives. And I thank the 4 cardinal directions, even though we understand there are more. It's an honor for Michaeline and myself to be here tonight. We had a wonderful experience earlier today over at Princeton in sharing some of our story to try to engage the university to re-engage with the indigenous communities of the state of New Jersey in a way that benefits us mutually. to prevent any type of modern day extraction, and to continue on in that journey of healing that we're on over the last 500 years, and to include them in that process. It's the same process that we are engaged in with Rutgers, both in New Brunswick and in Newark. It's the same process that we're engaged with Montclair State University. It's the same that we're engaged in with Ramapough College, NYU Environmental Medicine, NJIT, Sussex Community College, Penn Praxis, and I'm sure that I'm leaving out one or two. So it's an honor for me to be here. I will be available, after a while here to answer some questions. And so I thank you for being here. Anishik, thank you.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. It's good to see everybody. And the place was empty just a few minutes ago. I'm just going to fill it up right away. So I'm really happy to see everybody here. I'm not going to give a talk. I'm just going to say a few things. And really, rightfully, it's really Chief Mann and Michaeline Picaro who really embody the history and know the stories. I would just say, as a historian who's trained in kind of a Western form of scholarship, that there's certain ways in which I felt betrayed by the profession. Stan, first of all, I'm really happy that Stan Katz is here, and we're really honored to have him and the prize that the New Jersey Council of Humanities is named after him. And we're trained in a certain kind of way in which we're looking at the archives, and the archives are generally written, and what's recorded, but what's also not recorded. So the difficulty we have, especially in looking at the so-called pre-colonial period, these are all periodized in ways that are problematic to begin with, right? So the pre-colonial period, there aren't too many archives, there aren't too many things to read. We can't go to the archives and just kind of find what happened and what was going on. But in fact, part of the problem is that those archives are already defined in a colonial way. So the tradition of oration, the tradition of the oral traditions, the tradition of what wampum beads and wampum belts tell, those stories are not acknowledged as part of the archival tradition traditionally. And then we reach the colonial period, and somehow it's a series of discoveries. The Dutch purchase of Manhattan, traded for baubles and beads. We know all these stories from childhood, and even though we've tried to complicate that as historians, they tend not to be complicated in terms of the stories that the public still remembers. Right? And then being at Rutgers at Newark, 1666, the Puritans from Connecticut come and found the city of Newark. Well, it's a more complicated story, So the archives don't reveal too much, and how do we begin to actually trouble the archives and actually decolonize the archives? How do we tell the more complex stories that have to do with the relationship to the land? And from an indigenous point of view, all that is living, the river, the Pacific River, the winds, the rocks, the fish weirs that are made out of stones, that are the oldest living structures that we have in this region. Do we know about them? Do we understand what they're about? Can we begin to tell those stories and treat that evidence in a way that can do proper justice to the so-called pre-colonial period? But what happens during the colonial period is that, as Chief Mann was talking about, extraction. All that nature becomes parcels of property, and all those who own those parcels of property suddenly have the right to extract from that property at their will in a way that for farmers perhaps is more modest, but as it progresses, as iron ore is discovered in northern New Jersey, some of the richest deposits of iron ore in the nation, then it becomes a form of extreme extraction. It becomes a form of industrialization which requires more and more trees to be chopped down to be able to heat the forges, to be able to extract, to make the ore. So we can go on, but part of what I'm learning and relearning from a history that I really didn't have a chance to learn when I was in graduate school is that dispossession of indigenous lands, which was not just, oh, they're pushed off the land, but the intimacy of being on a land for 10,000 years and knowing it so well and being able to name the places in which certain activities would happen. That was shared common knowledge. It was a shared commons for those who were passing through on the trails. For that to dramatically be changed to fenced-in properties, and then to have the extractive process be driving that, that was also related to enslavement. So that once a land is created, so-called, what was needed to work the land in the cheapest, most profitable way possible. And that was it was deeply, intimately connected to the Caribbean enslavement system. So in New Jersey, as I'm learning, I had not studied the history of New Jersey, but I'm learning that in many ways, New Jersey was the most northern, of the southern states. And the practices that were happening in Newark, but also throughout the state, need to be understood more seriously than simply a northern state that was aligned with the right cause, right? Much more complicated story. So if we're understanding dispossession and enslavement as being linked to extraction, then part of the question, this gets closer to the area of my work that I've done, is what was the extraction for? A major reason of what extraction was driving extraction, especially in this early period, was to trade internationally. It was to trade, especially with China, which was seen as the place that had these fabulous riches, things that the European nobility and the rising merchants wanted to gain, the silks, the porcelains, all of these kinds of things. General George Washington was obsessed, I can say, with having a proper Chinese-made porcelain set on his headquarters tables in the middle of the Revolutionary War, right? So what did it mean to be a gentleman or a gentlewoman of European standing, of European status, as these new colonists began to fight for a national identity? So these are much more entwined, complicated questions, but if the fight for land and for resources was to build the wealth through trade, then we've got a very complicated foundation to what the new nation was about. And all subsequent people who migrate into this region then become part of that phenomenon. So in some ways, that's the dilemma we're in right now, and that we're trying now not so much to treat that as an indelible past, but in the present to understand what actually happened and to make changes in what happened. And clearly we know from issues of global warming that it's, yes, of course, it's industrialization. Yes, of course, the Passaic River and many of our rivers are just so badly polluted. Of course that happened. But the fundamental problem that happened earlier was really about the relations to the land and the extractivism and the attitude that was brought to that relationship. And what's happening to the soil, we know what's happening to the air, what's happening to the water, are the fundamental questions that are about the land and what we have to do about it. So when the Intergovernmental Panel on Global Warming and Climate Change is meeting, and they're talking about that we actually have to learn. These are scientists, hundreds of scientists who are compiling their information, finding the trends that are going on. And when they talk about we need to take indigenous local knowledge seriously, this is what they're talking about. So we're talking about land and needing to understand the land in an intimate way that can rebalance the relationships. And it's not about the past, it's about the future. And it's about the future that are the generations to come, the 3 generations of people that we already know who are in the world, and the relationship to the three generations who we've known already in the past. It's about the future, past, and present, all at the same time. And that's really a different way of thinking about time and progress than the Western approach that we're really kind of immersed in. So I just wanted to say those things, and that part of the issue that we have, especially the challenges of the Munsee Lenape, is that they've been recognized by the state, but also not recognized federally, and also perceived still by people in northern New Jersey as somehow inauthentic, Jackson White. Some of you may have heard that way of referring to of Munsee Lenape peoples, and also accusations of being not truly American, not Indians, but somehow being Afro-Dutch. So the scholarship that we're engaging with, and this is where our colleague Anita Bakshi and many other people, the work is so valuable, because that kind of misinformation, really false scholarship, really has to be challenged. So that's why it's especially wonderful that Anita's book has been awarded the Stan Katz Award from the New Jersey Council of Humanities, because it's really an affirmation that quality scholarship based on real research has to win out in this kind of fight. So I'm not going to say too much more. It's really Chief Mann and Michaeline and other Munsee Lenape knowledge bearers who really know the history the best. But I kind of wanted to set a context for the stake of the issues that we're really grappling with. And it's something that we all have to be involved with, because it's not about the past, it's really about the future. So thank you.
Thank you, Jack, for those kind words about our book project, Our Land, Our Stories, a project co-created with the Ramapough Lenape Turtle Clan, of whom Chief Mann and Michael Bucaro are here, and other, you can see by this list, I'm not going to read all the names, but many people played a role in kind of pulling this project together, and we are incredibly grateful to the New Jersey Council for the Humanities and to Stanley Katz for recognizing this project. I just wanted to give a really brief overview of how this project came together. It started in 2018 when I taught a design studio class at Rutgers Department of Landscape Architecture, where I teach, and where I asked students to think about how do we memorialize and commemorate environmental losses and what it means to lose connection to the land. And through that process, we met Chief Mann and other Turtle Clan members who showed us around the Superfund site that is also their home, and we really wanted to kind of stay and continue working on this project. So after that studio, and with I think 3 grants from the New Jersey Council for the Humanities, we were able to pull together this collaborative book project. All these slides I'm going to show you just to give you a quick walkthrough. These are all 2-page spreads from the book, which is available on that back table. So some of the things we're really interested in, we're thinking about how we can map land and land relations in a non-Western way, and thinking about other connections to land and territory and language. And because the Turtle Clan, many members still live on an active Superfund site, we were trying to convey that information in a way that's really easy to understand, which was the exact opposite of what we faced in looking through these like thick stacks of EPA and NJDEP reports, where you almost feel like they're deliberately making this information as difficult to understand as possible. So we wanted to think about how we could make this information clear so people could understand impact on land and on bodies. And also really wanting to highlight that these aren't just things that people are passively receiving, but that indigenous communities all over North America are really actively working against environmental justice issues on their lands. And part of this involved, kind of what Dr. Tchen alluded to in his talk, which is how do we make sense of what we see in the colonial archives and the biases that are embedded within those. So we really wanted to pick through all of that information as well, and pull out different pieces of that evidence that's presented and kind of just accept it as taken for granted fact, and point to the biases embedded in there, and then ask viewers and readers to really think about, what evidence is typically considered, and what do you think about what's presented, and make up your own mind, make your own opinion from that information. So what that meant is that we, as landscape architects, we kind of employed the typical methods we would often use for investigating the landscape. But then we also really had to learn from the Ramapough and other community partners who are very integral partners in kind of creating this book and telling this story through things like sharing design ideas, going to events, cooking and eating food together. And then also felt like it was really important in the book and in other projects related to it to share stories in original voice, so that it's not just the academics and people who work in universities and have degrees telling you what you should think about the story, but we really wanted to present people talking about their experiences in their original voice. And really, again, to emphasize, it's not just these narratives of damage, but it's also active responses. So we really wanted to highlight the incredible work at the Muncie Three Sisters Medicinal Farm. And it was a lot of just interacting and collaborating to share stories. And we wanted to do this in a way that was as accessible as possible. So we had the exhibit that you see now on the ground floor, originally in the Newark Public Library in 2019. We also have a digital exhibit online for Rutgers University that you can look up with the same name. And yeah, just wanting to share the story in as engaging a way as possible. So in 2020, we filmed the documentary. We're going to share a little clip with you now called The Meaning of the Seed. And wanted to make that very active and ask viewers to think not just about the story of this community, but also how that connects to their own experiences. Do you live near a Superfund site? What environmental losses have you experienced? And how can you become involved and participate in the project? And just to point you to, we have the table in the back with the books for sale, and all proceeds above the print costs go directly to the Ramapough Lenape, so please consider purchasing a copy. So we know that was very brief, but I think I'm going to leave it there because we want to play just a short clip of this movie.
Yeah, I was just getting comfortable back there. We had a late night last night. We got home about 1 o'clock in the morning, and we were in Chappaqua, New York, and doing the other things that are unseen and unheard in most parts. We were up there showing our support to save Buttonhook. And Buttonhook is a piece of property that has remained untouched, owned by the school board, who wants to sell it to a developer to put in 6 houses, that would be 10, 12, $20 million homes. And the reality of it is that our culture is still there, that the ceremonial stone landscape is still there. The importance of ceremonial stones to us is the same importance of the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, not just to people of the Jewish faith, but a lot of people from a lot of faiths go there, right? And so they deserve that protection here as well. So you are getting the idea that our community has the last 50, what's this, 2000, I don't know, 50 something years, 9 years or so, have been suffering at the hands of colonialism, but also at the hands of the eugenics movement, the erasure that our people have been a part of and been witness to, and the pain that comes from that, not just to us as adults, not just to what elders we do have, but also to our children. Right? So our children are having to relive all of those things that we went through as adults, even to this day. And so this story is a story of our life, we may not have been removed in totality, to Wisconsin or Kansas or Canada, but we too are living in diaspora, right? We too don't have access to the lands in which, we lived upon. And those lands that we came to settle upon, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, became a primal or prime area to dispose of environmental waste. And it wasn't even that waste all the way back then, in the 40s and the 50s, was not known to cause cancers, because DuPont, who is famous here in New Jersey as well, created much of the chemicals that were used by the Ford Motor Plant in Mahwah, New Jersey. I've seen the book myself, right, from 1956. It didn't say this may cause cancer, possibly. It said this will kill you, right? And we even went as far as trying to get records from the Ford Motor Corporation of their employees, right? Specifically their employees who did the cleaning up, the ones who worked in the paint shop, the ones that worked in the cleaning parts department. And no, you're not getting that. Why aren't we going to get that? That's because Henry Ford's only mission in life, right, was to create a human machine, right? And the sad part about what has happened to the Ramapough people happened to our relatives that live, all those miles away, right, in Germany. The Ramapough were faced with a public lethal gas chamber in 1923. That's not public knowledge, although it is, right? Because I found it. And the person who, was so honored to be the one to offer up the 18 different ways to deal with the unwanted people of the Ramapough Mountains was no other than Margaret Sanger, the person who created Planned Parenthood, the entity that's responsible for murdering over 60 million African American babies, right? But prior to that happening, full erasure of those indigenous people of the Northeast, mainly southeastern New York and northern New Jersey, was high on their radar. They need to eliminate us one way or the other, whether it was by paper genocide, whether it was, the fact that, when the English came through, they burned down all of the, the official buildings and the churches and the schools and all these other things, and the records that connected us to areas beyond a certain reality, is what some people determined that, we basically were just dropped out of the sky and put in that spot. That's just nonsensical. The Ramapough are an amazing group of human beings. We all have our good and our bad, but the reality of it is that Muncie-speaking people, that is from the Raritan River, right, north, that's Manhattan, that is eastern Pennsylvania, that is far north is just, a little bit south Albany. It is also not just western Connecticut, but Tapgow, Taphantz, whatever you want to call him, was on land deeds as far west or far east as Farmington, Connecticut, where the Tungus were. And why I bring his name up and I know I've regressed a little bit, but I'll get to the happy part, is that, you know, we prove, right, through lineal descent, you know, that Ponus, right? Who was Ponus? Ponus was Grandpa Ponus, right? He was a chief. The Europeans wanted to give his village or his community at that time, you know, a name with a Gesek. That wasn't the name of the people. The name of the people was Ramapough, right? The original human. The name that was bestowed upon them in his village was actually the name of the village. It was the name of the town. We're in the town of Princeton today, right? But if we go to Mawa, right, we would be in Mawa way, right? If we go to Ramapough, right, except for we're not in our dialect, we're in L dialect. We wouldn't have said Ramapough, we would have said Lamawa. It was actually on a land deed in the 1600s where Katona is on there as in saying, you know, I am the sole sachem of the Ramapough Indians. Now, there's a lot of people who want to say that the Ramapoughs never existed, you know, but in 1625, the European settlers decided that that was a fact, and they wrote it down because they didn't have an agenda. They needed to document who it was that they were getting that land from. And so Tap Hands, Tap Yao, his nephew was Katona, right? Tap Yao's brother was Onyx, the elder. That was also Katona's father. Ponus, right, was the father and grandfather to them all. My great-grandfather, going back those generations ago, is Chief Manus. Sometimes you might hear it said in a different way because it depended if it was the English saying it or the Dutch saying it or whomever, even other indigenous people. And so through and I bring this up because it was what you were staring at, right? And what Dr. Jack Tchen had shared. The federal government knows who we are. You know, I mean, the federal government in 1923, the Smithsonian, right? They acknowledged that the canoe bottoms that were found in Whittick Lake, which was being dredged for a reservoir for Butler, New Jersey, 3 things floated to the surface. They noted that it looked like Saragossa seaweed. And so when they went out there to investigate it, they found that there was 3 canoe bottoms, that they were 800 to 1,000 years old, and that they were from an extinct cedar. So just imagine, if they were that old and then it came from an extinct tree, right? And then they went on to say, and this is the only time that I've ever heard this in regards to indigenous people, to the United States as we know it. And they said that these 3 canoe bottoms belong to the ancient tribe, the Ramapough. Ancient, right? There is other references that refer to the Ramapough people as being ancient people. You know, most people think that when they see the Ramapough Mountains and they don't resemble the Himalayan mountains, that they're not that old, right? That they're just the way that they are. But in reality, you know, the Ramapough Mountains were bigger than the Himalayan mountains. And it tells you how old these mountains are because they've been subjugated to human extraction, to earthquakes, to, you know, just the natural, you know, cycle of the environment that has beat it down. Ancient is correct, right? We're the people who were put in this place by our creator, Kishala Mokwang, to keep the balance, to keep the peace between the Iroquois Confederacy and all other Algonquin-speaking people. That was our job, right? And so as we come forward, right, we obviously were able to stave off a public lethal gas chamber, but we were not able to prevent ourselves from becoming sterilized, mainly our women. So sterilizations that took off across this country and really took off in California was actually created on our young women that were taken from their parents And they were, when they went to go see the doctor, he was drawing their anatomy and figured out how to sterilize them. So here we are, these people that everybody wants to love to hate or love to forget or don't want to acknowledge, but we are at the forefront of some of the worst atrocities, right, that this world has ever known, that we can go back to in history and say, well, this has not been that long ago. And yet everybody wants to just totally discount us for who we are. You know, the steel that holds the dome over the Capitol building where the people are in Washington, D.C., who are supposed to make these laws to protect you and I and to provide and bring back to us, right? That steel came from the Ramapough mines. My family members are the ones who touched it. Yet we get no knowledge of that. Our people, and my grandfather, Abram Mann, he marched in the Revolutionary War, right? On the side of the rebels. Anybody know who the rebels were? Us. That's right, us. Us. We. Right? This melting pot. You know? We carry the blood of almost every single culture that has found its way to this country, because 98% of them have found their way here via New York City, right? And we can see New York City from the Ramapough Mountains, from Split Rock, which we just were successful in preserving, right? That spiritual center. And so coming forward, you know, you see the part of the story. Ford Motor Corporation bought 900 acres in Ringwood, New Jersey, under the guise of Ringwood Realty. It was a subsidiary company. They planned on building a self-contained executive housing community full of schools, stores, gas stations, and the like, right where our community was. There was over 1,100 souls. They lost the bid to do that too. And within months, not years, but in months, and it wasn't 1967, as Ford claims, but in 1964, in the fall, they began to dump their toxic poison down our throats, bouncing out on the roads, you know, in the water, where we would harvest the wild edibles and the wild medicinals and the animals and the fish. You know, and then they got smart and said, oh, well, let's throw some parts in there with, you know, copper, you know, like alternators and things like that. And what did that do? That took our people and went, oh, look at that, has a value. And they went in there and they played with it and they took it, right? Just to make $1, because we were some of the poorest people, not just in this state, but in this country. We're the ones that everybody, again, loves to hate, you know? If somebody wants to call me a Jackson White to give me federal recognition so that I can turn around to the people who really are the heroes, or the unsung heroes, the ones who can't be here to speak tonight, either because they're at home sick or they have to work 3 jobs because 5 people who live with them cannot work, or because they're dead. Michaeline and I buried over 90 of our people within 3 years. Who does that? Even if we weren't indigenous people, who do you know that's sitting next to you right now that can bear witness to that? What would it do to your family? What would it do to your children? What would it do to your mental capacity to exist in a colonial society which has taught us to be computers, where you have over 300+ million Americans who think about I, me, and mine? They have tricked the people, the citizens of this country, into believing that that's the best thing for all of us, right? To be separate from one another, to don't have that sense of community, to not grow a garden and give vegetables to your elder who may be living next door, who can't take care of themselves because one of their partners or their husband or their wife died because of contamination, or just because of being able to be so blessed to be an elder. We tend to sit inside here and look out the window and go, oh my God, look how bad it is outside. There's 3 feet of snow. You can barely see little Jimmy. All you see is his little red hat as he's going through the snow, right? Or when the hurricane comes and we watch the trees blowing back and forth and falling over and crashing into another tree and knocking that down. We are so separate. They have desensitized us as human beings, right? Now, all of a sudden, as you're separate from nature, what happens when that 400-year-old oak tree comes crashing through your house, right? Not that it hurts you, but what happens when all of a sudden you're getting 3 inches of rain an hour and 60-mile-an-hour wind gusts in your home? All of a sudden nature says, you're not separate from me. You can never be separate from me. Honor me, right? Love me. Put your arms around me. And so that's what Michaeline and I have done. We created Muncie Three Sisters Medicinal Farm. We didn't ask anybody for anything. We took our first mortgage payment to lease that 14 acres that we shouldn't even have to lease because our ancestors farmed it prior to the colonel who was given the land afterwards. And so we took it upon ourselves to create this farm, and originally we were going to grow hemp to produce the one thing that everybody in the world craves, dollar bills. Except for we weren't doing it to become wealthy people. We're already that. We were doing it so that we could go and hire experts and lawyers to do what we asked them to do, not what they think they can win. Because sometimes winning is not necessarily just that, right? The fact that, internationally, if we were to be able to come to that court, right, at the federal level to hold all those people accountable for the atrocities that occurred here and still occurring here, just like it's happening in Ukraine right now, right? We understand that wholeheartedly, the totality of that, right? Because it's what happened to us. We're seeing it played out again, So we created our farm. Michaeline figured, you know what, as a registered nurse, that we should try to heal our people from the inside out. It's a lot cheaper to buy a seed than it is to buy a lawyer, but we did. And so we did not grow hemp the first year. We put in a small garden just to be reassociated and connected to the land. And the reason why was because COVID came. And when you have a community that is already health compromised because of the actions and inactions of others, you have no choice but to go into another mode. And so Michaeline spent thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of dollars of money, of her own money, right, to rent trucks and U-Haul trucks and our time to go everywhere, to get masks, to get hand sanitizers, to, face shields, diapers, all of those things, food, and keep those people in their houses. They didn't even realize how protected they became because of the actions of us, right? And we don't go around knocking, saying, hey, look what we did, right? That's not us. That's not even our culture, But they felt so comfortable that they let it lapse. That was from March of that year until November. And they felt so comfortable that none of them got ill that they decided they were going to go to a wedding. Bad. A lot of people got ill. I think we lost 1 or 2 people. But the effects of getting COVID, right, on top of already having, cancer or heart ailments or eye issues or diabetes and all sorts of things, problem. So we created the farm. The idea was that if you're going to eat cabbage, don't eat green cabbage, eat red cabbage. It's a superfood, right? Eat peas, a superfood. Eat other vegetables that are purple or blue or dark red, right? Because the medicinal value in those foods is a lot higher. And we did so and maintained, starting last year, that every other week during the growing season that we have a free farmers market for our community in Ringwood. And we don't just do it for them, but that's where we hold it. We grow enough food in a high density that we have to make up for that by using fish fertilizer and water more often to produce more fruit, more food, for the rest of our communities that we have in our tribe. But also this year, Michaeline has directed me that little farm needs to go to elderly housing, assisted living, and offer, elders who are not from our community, but who are our relations, right? These vegetables as well. So, in the corner over here, we don't have a word for time. We really don't. We really don't. And we have a borrowed word, and I refuse to use it except for when I say this, and that word is clocko. So, we are now entering our second year grant with NYU Environmental Medicine, where Michaeline and I do not have to spend $125,000 of our own money. We do, right? We get it back when they feel they should pay us back. But at least for 5 years, we're in that recovery mode, and we can just concentrate on, creating a program that is beneficial not just to our community, but to all communities, because we're all hurting. We're all suffering. We just don't see it. So thank you. I don't know, do we have any questions, or?
I think we do have questions, but I'd like everyone to thank Chief Mann.
I appreciate you all, but just really quickly, when I was a little kid, didn't speak in school. And the reason why was because I was ridiculed, I was bullied, I had to be taught sign language because there was something wrong with me. Anybody want to guess what was wrong with me?
Native American.
Yeah, and because when I went to school, I was bullied, I was beat up, I was spit on, I was punched, I was hit with a ruler, and it was not just the kids. It was also those adults. Until one day I went like this, and I grabbed a ruler, not knowing what the outcome of that would be, but the outcome was you're going to the principal's office, and your father's coming from his job, and you're in trouble, Mr. Mann. I didn't say anything. My father came there, went into the office, and he looked at those adults and he said, if any one of you ever touch my son again, you will be in court so fast that your head will spin. And then we got outside, we went into the car, and the very first thing my dad did was turn around at me and look at me and say, don't you ever disrespect an elder again. That's the truth, right? With that, thank you.
Hi, I have a couple of questions. One, I wanted to say thank you so much for the video and for how you painted a very clear picture of the experience that you and your Ramapough group have experienced. I wanted to know, first part of the question is, are you happy and do you find joy? Like everyone in this room, we've experienced and we're still experiencing various things, but are you happy? So before answering that question, the other thing is, I also wanted to know, what is it that you would like Ford Motor Credit to do as solutions? What would you like, I think, DuPont? What would you like the governor? What are those solutions that you're actually looking for?
So I think you just, on your first question, you need to explain yourself just a little bit more. Am I happy that Michaeline is here, but maybe not in this room?
No. Like, as an individual, your whole entire life, are you happy?
Am I happy? My belief, and I believe our belief, is that when we come back to this place from the spirit world, that every time we come back, we're provided an opportunity to make this experience for others better than it was the previous time. I believe that every time that we come back to this place from the spirit world, that it's another opportunity for us to heal, not just ourselves, but those that we see around us. Life is a healing journey. If we look at life as something that is in front of us, we need to gain, and acquire all these things. If you don't live your life that way, they will come to you so much easier. You won't have to strike. You won't have to be angry. You won't have to be so angry that you leave work, come home, your children are sitting right there and go, hey, Dad, and you don't even acknowledge them. You throw your keys on the table, you go to the refrigerator, grab a beer, sit right next to them, turn their cartoons off, put your feet up, and turn on the news. Right? That's what this world has become. And so, am I happy with my life? No. I'm honored. I'm privileged. Right? Because it provides me with an opportunity, right, to try to correct wrongs of the past, to try to make it so that the wrongs of all people, right, can be not justified, never forgotten, but understood as to why we shouldn't be doing those things in the future. As to your second part of your question, what would I like Ford Motor Corporation to do? Ford Motor Corporation, at the very least, should stand before this country, and it should apologize to the citizens of the United States of America. And they should take full responsibility for their actions, right? As far as the governor of the state of New Jersey, Sean LaTourette, the commissioner of the DEP, Sean Moriarty, who is the deputy commissioner of the DEP, the State Department, the Health Department, the Education Department, the EDA, the Department of Justice for the state of New Jersey, what they need to understand is that we are willing to work with them, right? We are willing to stand next to them at a podium and give a press release, right, for themselves. Yet all I see, right, all Chief Mann sees is one senator or a congressman next to those important people of the state doing very important things, creating very important laws for very important people. There's only one problem. We're not included in that. We're left out of that, right? So if you create a law, the new law is that if you have a community who is underprivileged and suffering, it doesn't matter whether it's minority or not, but if it is a minority community, and if it's a Native American minority, underprivileged, underserved, poor community, we can't add anything else to it, right? If we are that, then why is the state of New Jersey allowing the town of Ringwood to put a recycling center in the very spot in the O'Connor disposal area, right? Push all of the contamination to the middle and put an earthen cap on it and put a recycling center, which is a continuation of dumping on us, right? They should not allow that to happen. And on the second part of that, that was where the worst contamination in the entire place existed. When they took the chemicals out of there years and years and years ago, they didn't do the whole thing, but what they did was they took some of the paint sludge that was in that area and they shipped it to Michigan, right? It went through the furnace, come out the other side, and people, scientists, people who are smart and know, said, holy crap, let's put this back through there. Something's obviously wrong. Somebody didn't have the temperature right. And they ran it through there again. And when it came out the other side the second time, they said the exact same thing again. And they picked up the phone and they hit the one single phone that has that one button on it, like it's an emergency, and they did it. And they called the EPA. They said, get all of your people and those contractors out of there now. Machines went silent, the workers left, the EPA left, and nobody saw anybody for months. And then they decided to tell us that the reason why they had to shut that down, not the chemicals that are sitting there, not the chemicals that are still there, not the chemicals that are still there that they consolidated, right, and moved and pushed to the back next to the wetlands that's not included in the Superfund site for some reason, never been tested until soon because of us, right? But they didn't tell us how toxic that was. They didn't tell us how toxic it was after it had been treated twice. It was so toxic, it could not be buried anywhere in the continental United States or U.S. territories. We bury nuclear waste in this country, right? We have uranium that's on the surface, never mind what they do with it out west on Native American people. But those materials could not be buried anywhere in the continental United States or U.S. territory. So they took it across the border into Canada, which was the second time that the United States invaded them, right? Because the first time was when they were chasing Tecumseh. And what ended up happening was that they dumped it on an open landfill across the street from the Chippewa, and the Chippewa chief called my Uncle Wayne Mann, who you saw on here, not to yell at him, but to explain to him that what they did with those chemicals was dumped across the street from them, and that their people are witnessing the same health ailments that we have. And that was after it was treated twice. What do I want them to do? Own it.
I hate to be pointing at the clock. It's
No.
8:30.
I'm sorry, we are in a library too, right?
I know. And we will be closing. I think that there will be some time for everybody to come and say hello to Chief Mann and the other presenters.
I think you should give somebody one more question.
Okay.
Somebody has a question there that's really going to be dear to my heart. Sure.
Okay. Lynn?
You're such a blessing.
So, how can we help you?
Mhm. Somebody had to ask that question. The honest truth is that I don't know, right? The honest truth is that how do we help each other, right? What can we give you for what you could potentially give to us, right?
Writing letters to the governor, writing letters to the EPA, writing letters.
We have done those things, right? But I don't know who's sitting in this room, right? I don't know if there's a lawyer, I don't know if there's a doctor, I don't know if there is somebody who is wealthier than I don't know what. I don't know if there's somebody here who has land they want to donate. I don't know, right? I don't know if there's somebody sitting in this room right now who may be sick and have cancer, right? Because not for nothing, we know that the hemp that we grow on our farm can help those people survive. We know that when we take our hemp and we take our keef and we take mushrooms that are in pills, right, like turkey tail and lion's mane, that we can help them survive, right, and have a better quality of life. So to answer that question, honestly, right, I think it's something that you all really need to ask yourselves, because I am somebody who is very available, right? I'm very available through Kim, through Nagisa, through Tchen, through Anita. When we were over here at the university today, I told them that they needed to provide us with an office. This is the first meeting. And I gotta tell you, it was the most amazing thing, because our beautiful friend Sarah said, well, we have this space and it would be a shared space, but would that be okay? And I said, man, it doesn't get any better. So how do you help us? I'm not a person who goes to rallies. I'm not a person who's picketing. The Black Panthers was not a militant group, right? Black Panthers is not a militant group, but they were fighting for jobs and the right to be able to live, and then somebody decides that they're going to fix that, and somebody shot a gun, and next thing you know, they became militants, right? We know that that's not the truth, but that's what happened. I'm not an activist. Don't be an activist, right? Just be a human being, and know what our original instructions are is love, humility, wisdom, respect, honor, right? And if you walk through your life with those things, you'll be a better person than you had ever possibly imagined yourself being, And that will open up that will open the doors for yourselves. That is helping me, right? For you all to be better people, right? To leave here with the knowledge that even though we live with the most, some of the worst atrocities that this country has ever witnessed, right? That we have the strength to sit here and say to you all that we're here for you, right? To acknowledge us for who we are, to stand behind us for who we are as human beings first, and then indigenous people second, you know, is a very powerful thing. You know, we just remember we, ours, and us. You know, we cry, we bleed, and I know everybody in this room does. You know, that's what's important. You know, just don't give up on humanity, because if anybody was going to do that, it would be me. And I'll leave you with the fact that my grandfather shared with me before he passed on April 4th of 1977. He was born in 1895. Incredible human being. He was one of the first people ever to have a successful tracheotomy. You know, from licking those little diodes back in the day, right? And they gave him throat cancer. But my grandfather, in a very raspy voice, took all his grandchildren and said that you know that the sun always shines. I got it, yep, thanks for some religion, Grandpa, right? Of course, I would never speak like that because that would be disrespectful, and I never was as a child. But I didn't understand what that meant in its totality, you know? Because as I grew older, it never left me, and I continue to think about that, right? Until just a few years ago. And the reality of it is that it wasn't a metaphor, right? Always. That sun is always shining, even on the darkest of days. Even though, you know, it looks dark outside, and even though the clouds came in, we didn't see the sun, and you just got to be thankful that the sun is shining somewhere, because other people need that too. You know. So with that, I thank you, and I'm sure we'll be here for another 20 minutes if that clock's right.
Thank you so much, everybody.